Hello and welcome everybody to another Ask Me Anything session here at Prisma with our engineering team from the ORM. My name is Nicholas Berg. I'm a staff developer advocate here at Prisma. And for today's session, I would say that we start with a quick round of introductions because we have some familiar, some new faces of these AMA sessions here. So Will, why don't you go ahead and just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Will. I'm the engineering manager for the Prisma ORM team and Prisma expansion team. Um, Part of my job is talking to the community and trying to understand the voice of our community and help to turn that into the direction that the team will take. So I'm here mostly representing like the product direction of the team.
Nice. And I think you've done a really good job since you've joined us in like listening to the community and actually picking up what they've been saying. And a lot of the initiatives that we are doing at the moment in Prisma, you really have been spearheading over the last couple of months. So it's great to have you on the show today. And then we have two engineers. The first one is Jacek. So how long have you been with Prisma, Jacek, and what are you working on here?
So I've been at Prisma for around 8 months now. So I've been on the ORM team. I'm working on the Rust engines, if people know what they are. It's basically the thing that's sort of disappearing, kind of.
Thing that we're removing.
Yeah. Well, it's being replaced with a new architecture that we call the query compiler. But yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have Igal here. Igal, could you also quickly introduce yourself? Oh, we can't hear you. You seem to be muted. But I can.
Yeah. I just want to say hi, Mom. First live stream. I am Igal. I'm a software engineer on another team, not on the ORM team at the company. I've been in Prisma for around a year now. Happy to join. Happy to discuss everything we've been cooking lately.
All right. And for everybody who's watching, Igal is a Prisma engineer by day, but by night you have a side project that's in a very similar space, Igal. Which one is that?
So I'm co-leading Kisely, which is SQL type-safe query builder in the same space that we operate with Prisma ORM. So it's very fun to wear both hats. Really exciting.
You are definitely a TypeScript database expert. I think that's fair to say. And actually, as of today, Kisely can also be used with Prisma Postgres. So as of today, we launched direct TCP connections for Prisma Postgres. So in the past, Prisma Postgres was only usable with Prisma ORM. Now you can also use it with Kisely and other ORMs. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on the show today. All right, for everybody who is watching, as usual, we are taking questions in the YouTube comments, so feel free to drop them there. But we're also monitoring Discord. We have the Dev AMA channel there, and we'll be picking up questions from there too. And on Twitter, we're also live. So if you have questions, then you can also just drop them under the tweet where you see us right now, and we'll pick them up, and our engineers are going to respond to those. We have a couple of bigger topics for today that I want to go through and where some questions arrived. And these are all related to all the things that we have released in the last couple of weeks. Just to tease already what we want to cover on the ORM side, a big topic is going to be the query compiler. That's why we have Jacek here. Then we want to talk about the VS Code extension. And actually, I want to do a quick demo of the new UI, like a visual user interface that we added to the VS Code extension that you can now use to manage databases and view and edit your data with Prisma Studio directly in VS Code. And then we'll talk a little bit about Prisma Postgres as well, the local Prisma Postgres that you can use for development that Igal has been working on, and also the direct TCP connections and some other interesting news that happened there recently. So go ahead and drop your comments. And for now, let's kick off the AMA with questions about the query compiler. And yeah, maybe you just want to give an overview, Jacek. What is the query compiler and why should people care about it?
Yes. So basically, the query compiler is a completely new architecture for Prisma, where we are removing native Rust components from sort of like the user bundle that users consume entirely, meaning when you run queries against a database, the only components that run is a query interpreter that we wrote in JavaScript and a query compiler that's written in Rust but compiled to WASM, meaning there's no native binaries. The query compiler architecture, it's very different from what we do currently. So currently have this big runtime that it's basically, you can think of the current Prisma as a wrapper around a big Rust project, and that's compared to native binaries. So when you send a query, there's a JSON representation of it going to the runtime. The runtime does a bunch of data mangling. It returns a big blob of data. This blob of data gets deserialized and gets returned to your JavaScript code. That is obviously that's not a very efficient way of going about doing database work, because if you, let's say you read a large amount of data from a database, our runtime component has to deserialize it and serialize it, because Rust and JavaScript, they're two different languages that don't easily interrupt. And because of that, there's a lot of sort of like serialization, deserialization going on. With the query compiler, that actually doesn't happen at all. There is still some serialization, but the serialization is not for the data, it's for a query plan. So what happens is we first request a query plan, and that's a very quick operation. It should complete almost instantaneously, because it basically just returns a plan of how to execute a query without actually running any queries yet. And once the plan is constructed, the Rust part has finished. There's no more work needed for the Rust part. So once the plan is constructed, the plan is executed from JavaScript, and the JavaScript no longer needs any interrupt with Rust from that point onwards.
Very nice. Thank you for the overview. Actually, we already have one question here that came in about like precisely what you were saying. Isn't it faster to use Rust, which is known to be a very fast system-level programming language? Wouldn't that be faster than using the like Postgres adapters in this case, or other like plain JavaScript drivers essentially that are written in JS? So why is it faster to move away from Rust if it's such a fast language?
So here's the problem. The Rust runtime, like it's not a performance sensitive application really. It doesn't do a lot of valuable work. Like most of the work is communication with database. And nice thing about the query plan, basically the way it looks like is run this query, map this data to this shape of a record. So read a bunch of fields from the database and construct a JavaScript record. And because this is not the kind of performance sensitive operation as, for example, deserializing a million rows is, right? Which can be a bottleneck. But the things that the query engine is doing is just the benefits of Rust. They're not really highlighted there, because the work it's doing is not performance sensitive really. The stuff that's performance sensitive has to do with like deserializing data from a database, because that's where you can like encounter scale problems, where if you run a large query, that's where you would see that bottleneck. So we don't really get many of the benefits of Rust in the runtime component, just because of how.
We also get performance problems from using the
Yeah.
Rust native VM, right?
Yes, that's right. Because of the inherent interrupt, like we have to translate all the data, we have to serialize it, because Rust can't like one-to-one communicate with JavaScript. Like you have to serialize the data. So that's a penalty of using Rust, and that's a big penalty. So, and we've done benchmarks, and we can see that it's actually faster not to use Rust. Like it's faster to have our query interpreter, which is written in JavaScript. So yeah, we are already seeing that.
what can we say about the limitations of the query compiler? Because actually, as of today, we released it into preview. Here is a comment about the query compiler having a lot of problems, which before it was an early access. So that's kind of expected, right? We don't recommend it for production use. This is just something we want to give to people to play around with, try out, give us feedback. Has anything changed about the mentioned limitations here now that it went into preview?
So we have an internal metric that shows us sort of the parity between the query compiler and the query engine. And the last release, 6.8, it was not very good. But in 6.9, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited about this release, is that we have almost 100% parity for driver adapters with the query engine, meaning for those 4 driver adapters, you should expect roughly the same behavior as query engine in virtually all circumstances. It's not 100%, like we have some test cases that are failing, but the number is below 1%, so it's very rare. So at the 4 driver adapters that you should expect to be roughly on par with the query engine are PG, libsql, better SQLite, and D1. I think Willie wanted to say something, didn't you?
No, you covered it.
Okay, cool.
I will just add, we released this into preview on Tuesday, and we really want feedback. So if you are in a position to try out the query compiler with a real world application, please give it a go and let us know if there are edge cases we missed or something unexpected happens, or you have some difficulty upgrading from the old version to the new. Give us a shout.
All right, and the same person here asked about support for the other databases, and yes, that's going to follow, right? I think already
Yes.
is it planned for the next release?
Yes, so it's actually going really well. So on our main branch, we already support like the vast majority of features for MySQL. So we are already like 90% of the way there. There's some work that's needed for actually using pure MySQL because we're currently testing things like against PlanetScale. But we expect very good MySQL support and PlanetScale support in the next release. That's right. And one more thing. So the question mentions Postgres and SQLite. So for Postgres and SQLite, we support all the Java adapters we currently have. I don't think there will be any new ones. So I think we're sort of done there. And there's also Microsoft SQL, which I think we expect in the next release as well. And I think that's feasible. I think we can have that in the next release. So yeah.
To answer the question from Alex Bevy, based on the Prisma ORM manifesto, I'm assuming all the first-class databases will be supported. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's our goal. We started with these 2. The next 2 coming out in the next release, which is on the 17th of June, will be MySQL and PlanetScale plus
Microsoft SQL
Server. Yeah, Microsoft SQL. And then in the following release, we'll do the next couple of databases until we've covered them all.
Perfect. Does anybody want to add anything else to the query compiler? I don't think we've any more questions about it. And if none of you have any further comments, then I think we can move on to the next topic. And that's the VS Code extension, the Prisma VS Code extension that has seen a major upgrade just today. And for the first time, it was a visual update. So if you're using Prisma, if you're familiar, you're probably using it with VS Code and the Prisma VS Code extension already. And I'm going ahead and sharing my screen right now. Let me just quickly set it up. Here it comes. And There it is. So this Prisma VS Code extension, I assume a lot of you will already have installed in your VS Code editors if you're using Prisma ORM. And usually what it gives you, it will add a bunch of functionality for the Prisma schema, such as the syntax highlighting that you see here, some quick fixes, auto completion. So all the good stuff that you really expect from a modern programming language, or in this case, kind of data definition language. And the new thing that you may have noticed is that now here in the sidebar of VS Code, you have this Prisma logo. So what happens if you click that? It allows you to manage Prisma Postgres databases, default ones, the local ones. At the moment, I have one local database that's called default. And then in my remote databases section, I have access to my workspaces that I have set up in the Prisma console. So I have one workspace here that's called the personal organization. That's the default workspace that everybody has. And I have 3 projects in here right now that are all associated with a Prisma Postgres instance, which I can now manage right here in VS Code. So let's take a look at what happens when I click on this database here. It opens an embedded Prisma Studio. This is brand new. So you couldn't do this before, and now you have this embedded Prisma Studio directly in VS Code, where you can view all the tables that are currently in your Prisma Postgres database. You can view and edit the data right here. You can navigate relations, as I just did. You can filter. So it's a very nice way to visually work with my data and my database. And along the way, I can even see what SQL queries have been fired as I was using and clicking around the tables here. And also we have this new thing that's a schema visualizer, where I can see the entire database schema and drag around the individual nodes here in an interactive way. So this is super exciting. I think it's one of the ideas that we kind of had floating around at Prisma for a while. So it's really nice that this has finally come to reality, and we can now share this with our community. By the way, what you can also do is you can create new databases and delete existing databases. So if I right click here, it says delete Prisma Postgres project. So I could remove it from my workspace, would be wiped out in the Prisma console if I accessed it through my browser as well. Or I can click the plus button here to create a new Prisma Postgres instance. I'm just calling it hello PPG right now. Then I can select the region. I want to have one in Europe since I'm based in Germany. And it's creating the project, sharing my connection string. And now I could go here into my .env files, switch this out with a new connection string that I just got, and run my migrations and my queries against a new database. I'm not going to do that here. I just wanted to show you what the UI looks like, what kind of workflows it enables. And what you don't see here, but what we have already seen internally, is that what I just did with deleting and creating new Prisma Postgres instances, in a few weeks or maybe even a bit sooner, you'll be able to do that as well with local database instances. And local database instances of Prisma Postgres is actually another topic that we want to cover here. Okay, that's it for the VS Code Studio demo. Were there any questions about it in the comments? I don't see any, neither on Discord or on Twitter. So I'll stop the screen share. Here was one question. How can I check if user exists without selecting anything? Basically return true or false.
So one way to do that is just to use the count function, see if it returns 0. That's probably like the most obvious way. Or just select the ID of the user. But yeah, either of those would work.
Yeah, a couple of ways come to mind, right? You could do a count and then check if it's 0. You can do a find unique and see if an object comes back. Or you could implement your own Prisma client extension. I've seen people do that. That is then called exists, and then they can call prisma.user.exists, pass an ID or some other unique identifier, and that could give them the precise return value that they wanted. All right, Pablo, that was your question. There is another question. I think that's about the VS Code extension that I just showed. Does it only work with databases that are on your side? And I assume you're meaning Prisma Postgres instances with that. And yes, for the time being, this only works with Prisma Postgres. We may enable it for other databases in the future, but for now, it's really all Prisma Postgres.
Yeah, actually, our plan is we have the Prisma Studio CLI command, and we have had it for a long time. And what that does is it will start Prisma Studio and run it in your browser, and it will connect to the database that your ORM is set up to connect to. Our plan is to bring the same capability into VS Code. We're just not quite there yet. Our first step was we're going to connect it to Prisma Postgres. Second step is we're going to connect it to the ORM so that you can browse whatever you're working on in your code base using the ORM. You can browse that with Studio inside VS Code, side by side with your code. Yep. That'll be coming out soon.
There is another question that I quickly want to pull in before we move on to the next topic. Any support to make a runtime query builder like Drizzle? Typed SQL is nice, but being able to construct queries programmatically is nice also. Will, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think I can field this one. The short answer is probably not. A runtime query builder is probably not a feature that Prisma is going to build, but we are looking into making it easier to combine existing tooling with Prisma's underlying connection. So, for example, something we're very interested in is an integration with Keasley, understandably, since we have Igal on our team. And then we could use Keasley to build queries that would be transported through Prisma. Does that make sense, Igal?
Which, by the way, is already possible today, and I already shared the link to the GitHub repo that makes it possible. But yeah, Igal, please.
Yeah, there's already out there multiple ways of combining Keasley with Prisma in the same project, and there's different ways to slice it. So while we were in this age of like edge compute and everyone was concerned about bundle sizes, we had the crowd that wanted to only do migrations with Prisma because the PSL language is awesome. But they did Keasley because it's lightweight and works everywhere. And now you see with the client extension, a mix in the same project where you have high-level, maybe CRUD functions that do some writes in Prisma ORM. But then when you need some very deep SQL analytical queries or very performant things that you want to like tinker, and people can step down to Keasley syntax. So this is already out there. There's multiple libraries that help you with this, like Prisma Keasley, that allows you to generate Keasley types from your PSL, and the client extension that was in there. So it's already possible. And as Will said, there's ways to make it more seamless, more enjoyable. Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Yeah. So you can use Keasley with Prisma ORM already today if you really want to. If you don't like typed SQL, that is already possible, but only via like third-party libraries that we haven't fully integrated yet. All right. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Prisma Postgres, because a lot of people actually still are unaware that Prisma is not only an ORM company, that we're not only building open source tools, but that we recently joined the group of database providers. We are providing a managed Postgres service that you can spin up with a single command, npx prisma init --db. And that gives you a Prisma Postgres, a PostgreSQL database that's running on a technology that's called unikernels. I won't go into detail what these are here because we've written about these extensively and you can go on our blog and read about them. But a couple of the benefits that unikernels have is that they eliminate cold starts, for example. They enable us to have super predictable and operations-based pricing, and a couple of other benefits that are really nice about Prisma Postgres compared to other providers. And that's just like the remote story of Prisma Postgres that I was just talking about, the remote instances. But we just launched a new feature in the last release 2 weeks ago only. That's local Prisma Postgres instances. Igal, you have been working on that feature a lot. Maybe you can give an overview of what local Prisma Postgres instances are, and then we can also talk a little bit about how they should be used, and what our plans are for them in the future.
So looking at the ecosystem of that you're trying to use while you're building with Postgres, there's various options out there that you can use for testing or local development. The main one out there has been for a while Docker. You download the Postgres image, it weighs around 1 gig. So imagine how heavy it is and how time consuming it is in CI, like GitHub Actions. And it's like running in the background, consuming a lot of RAM, a lot of CPU, and you can use it like to query it like you have a Postgres on your machine. This thing is very heavy, very clunky. Vendors out there, they try to wrap it in like CLI commands that spin it up but don't tell you it's Docker. But essentially, it's very slow and not really isolated for tests. For tests, you want isolation and fast, something that is fast to spin up. And this is where Prisma Dev comes in. Prisma Dev is a new CLI command that spins up Prisma Postgres locally. So you have both the HTTP API, and essentially this is under the hood. It's using a new technology called pglite from the Electric SQL team. These guys has been looking for a while, and the ecosystem only had SQLite in the browser and SQLite as a sync engine, and they decided to basically WASMify Postgres. They found a way to do it. It has some caveats. There's only one connection at a time, so you cannot really use it like a regular Postgres in production, but it still allows you to develop locally and run tests in memory, which is very nice to have because you don't have to clean up any state. Everything is isolated in memory, and it's very fast to spin up. And it also has like a persisted mode, which is something that we recently also implemented in Prisma Dev, which allows you to spin up a Prisma Dev server, close it, get back to it, and continue where you left off. So the data that you put inside of your Next.js app, it's still there. Those tables that you migrated, everything is still there once you get back to it. Essentially, Prisma Dev is currently something that you can use in your terminal. As I said, it's a CLI command that you start up. You take the connection string that's given to you from the output, and you put it in your PSL file, for instance, as a database URL in the .env file. And it works like seamlessly as if you're running against like a real remote Prisma Postgres. And it also works with the accelerated client extension. And we're building all sorts of like capabilities to it. And we're doing it as we speak. Like it's still very hot. And yeah.
Very nice. Thank you for the overview. And actually, I just thought this is a bit risky, but so I pulled up a new like VS Code project here, and I thought let's maybe run through the Prisma init flow and call Prisma Dev and try to do a migration just to show people what the flow actually looks like. So again, I'm going to share my screen here. Here is VS Code with a new node project. I just called npm init and then installed Prisma as a dev dependency. And here is the screen. So now if I run npx Prisma init, this is going to create a new Prisma directory. And in the Prisma directory, a Prisma schema file, a .env file with my database URL environment variable. And let's see first the the Prisma schema file. So we're using Postgres because that's the provider that you have to use when you're using Prisma Postgres. And by default, this now sets up a local Prisma Postgres instance. So it created this end file with a database URL. Let's take a look at that. So the structure of this URL is similar to the structure of a remote instance, right? It's called prisma.postgres://. That's specific to Prisma Postgres, this prefix. And then instead of the remote Prisma Postgres host, we just have local hosts here, a port, and similar to remote instances, also an API key. What's special about this API key, or how does it compare to the API key that you get when you're using a remote Prisma Postgres instance, Igal?
So this API key doesn't hold anything that is like vulnerable, so you can share it. And this entire URL is stable as long as you use the default ports, like you didn't do anything extra with your setup. And it basically allows us to provide the schema engine, the migration engines information about where the whereabouts of the Postgres servers that we just spun up for us to be able to migrate. Like currently the API key is just hashing of these details. And yeah.
That's great. And how can I now use this? So first I want to go ahead and add some models here. So I have my user and post models. So now I could just go ahead and try to run npx prisma migrate dev, right? Let's see what happens, because intuitively, that's what a lot of people would probably think. That's what they would need to do. So let's try this and see what happens. It's loading the environment variable from my .env file and is trying to run the migration. But I don't think we expect it to succeed, right? And that's also why it takes a bit longer now. And maybe it already failed internally, because that's not how the local Prisma Postgres is to be used. So how is it to be used? The way how it's to be used is that you first have to start our local Prisma Postgres server. And the way how to do that is with the Prisma dev command that you mentioned a couple of times, Igal. So now I'm going to do that. And this is now actually going to start my local Prisma Postgres server that then enables me to interact with, okay, maybe I had something set up already. Okay, well, this is happening live. It's probably because I had some local instance already running from before. In theory, I just wanted to walk everybody through the flow here. And the flow is that you first have to run the Prisma dev command to start your local Prisma Postgres server. And when that's running, then you can run migrations and queries against the local instance. That's the main point here. The Prisma dev command needs to be running while you're using local Prisma Postgres.
I have a feeling it's something to do with the Prisma version there not being up to date. Like it's not 6.9. At 6.9, we released a fix that basically turns the pools of the ORM into something that immediately kills all connections. So it allows you to work around the limitation of PGLite, which is one connection at a time. And I believe this is what's blocking there, because it's just waiting in queue to get some resources to run those migration queries.
That makes sense, and that's what I get for trying to do an unprepared live demo on the stream here with a brand new tool, and me also using like the internal versions and all of that before. So I learned my lesson and prepare my demos next time. All right, I think we are pretty much done with the section about the ORM of this AMA. I also haven't seen any new questions pop in here. So there are two more
question
things
earlier about accelerate, right?
The one about, let's see. Where is it? I think I saw something.
Yeah, from Artrix. Yeah, that's
using Prisma Accelerate and caching, will the cache be invalidated based on related data that may have changed, or does the cache clearing need to be controlled manually? Will, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So Prisma Accelerate caching is per query. It will cache the result of the query, but it doesn't cache models or relationships. And there's no automatic dependency tracking or cache clearing. You need to manually invalidate the cache. And there's extension to the Prisma query object that's Accelerate specific that lets you specify what the cache key is, and there's a separate method to explicitly invalidate the cache, I believe.
Yes, I'm just posting a link to that section in our docs. You can set tags on every query with your caching, and these tags allow you to then manually invalidate the cache as well.
Accelerate does more than just caching as well. It's also a connection pooler, which is a really useful property if you're doing things in, say, edge functions or serverless functions.
Exactly. Accelerate is also by default on top of Prisma Postgres. So Prisma Postgres comes with this connection pool and with the caching layer already enabled for you. There are two more things that I want to quickly mention that we have also released in Prisma Postgres very recently. And one I already teased at the beginning of this stream here, and that's that you can now connect to Prisma Postgres via any library or tool using direct TCP connections. Because in the past, since we released Prisma Postgres a couple of months ago, this was just usable via Prisma ORM. It was the only way how you could use Prisma Postgres, how you could migrate tables and your schema, and also how you could send queries to it. But now we've opened up Prisma Postgres to whatever tool you use. So if you prefer another ORM like Type ORM, Sequelize, Drizzle, or Keasley from Egal, then you're very welcome to try out Prisma Postgres with these tools and libraries as well. What's next for the local Prisma Postgres actually, Gal? Because I think that at the moment you can also only use local Prisma Postgres with Prisma ORM. Will it be possible in the future to use local Prisma Postgres instances with other ORMs and libraries as well?
Yeah, essentially it's just Postgres. It's just PGLite wrapped in a socket server. So you get like a connection string, you pass it to Node Postgres, Postgres.js, etc., and it just works. So it would work with driver adapters in the ORM. It would work with Drizzle, Keasley, with all the standard Postgres drivers.
And what other improvements do we have planned? I think I saw some internal conversations about using daemons in the context of Prisma Postgres as well. Can you say anything about that?
We're exploring all sorts of ideas. One of them is finding quality of life improvements. So right now you have to spin up the server with Prisma Dev, and you have to babysit that process. So as long as it lives, the server lives, and you have to manually kill it with Control-C. And daemons would allow you to basically spin it up. Don't wait for it to get spun up. It would live in the background, and you can do your usual stuff. The terminal is free to do other stuff as well. Like it's the experience you get from detached Docker, which is something we really want to see if we can bring to this as well.
Right, and that would probably be an experience that would be generally a little bit closer to what people are used to when they're using local Postgres instances, because typically I think people will have their Postgres server running on their machine without having explicitly started somewhere in the terminal and needing to keep the terminal tab open all the time just so that Postgres can keep running. So I think that we're moving into that direction so that a local Prisma Postgres will feel more like a regular local Postgres instance as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And how can people, like, when they've built their feature locally in development against a local Prisma Postgres instance, how can they go and make sure that they're now deploying that to a remote instance that they can actually connect to their deployed application as well? Like, what's the plan for that?
So right now we're planning to provide an ability in the VS Code extension, which would allow you to, I guess, right-click or click some button next to your local Prisma dev server and basically deploy it to Prisma's infrastructure. So start up a new Prisma Postgres server database and get a connection string to it, and it should have the same exact tables that you had, and maybe in the future also the data that you had locally. So you don't have to do it all over again or write seed scripts or whatever. Maybe that's a nice touch as well.
That sounds very convenient, yeah. Since today, I think the experience is like rather manual, right? Today, you just have to update the connection string like manually, and then like run the same migrations, whatever, against like the remote instance. So we're going to automate that and make that entire deployment flow a little bit more smooth. Will, I think you have some more topics that you can talk about. One is the NPS survey that we embedded in the Prisma CLI. And also I'm curious, like, what's the plan for the next release that's coming up in 2 weeks, actually?
Yeah, absolutely. The NPS survey has been a bit of a divisive topic, bit of a inflammatory topic for some people. There were a handful of people that reached out to us on Twitter and were unimpressed to see an NPS prompt coming out in their CI. And so we released an article. Well, I wrote an article recently trying to explain the motivation for why we are doing this, why we have a CLI tool that asks you for an NPS survey response, which is pretty unconventional. And the reason is, for those of you who are familiar with the Prisma ORM manifesto that we released in December, a really big goal of ours is to understand what matters to our community and work towards building the things that make a difference for our community. To hear the voice of our community is really important, that we can gauge, are we on the right track or not? And that's what this NPS survey is. We put it into the CLI tool because we want to meet our users where you live and work, which is in the terminal. We can ask people, we can put a link in the output or something and ask people to go online and fill out a form or whatever. But really, all we need from you is one number and optionally a comment. So that's what we do. We ask on the terminal, on the command line, for that information. We don't want to interrupt your workflows, though. So we already had logic that would try and prevent showing this in CI. We check for a handful of like really commonly used CI environment variables, and if they're present, we don't show anything. We certainly won't block your CI or your local workflow just to ask you a question. So we have a timer on this thing that will kill it if it sits there for more than 30 seconds, I think. But still, there are some environments where we can't detect that it's CI, and a few of these prompts slipped through and they really annoyed some people. So we've refined it yet again, and now we will show this question to you only if you have been using Prisma for at least 24 hours. It's super unlikely you've got any CI session that lasts 24 hours. So we will be trying to only present this question to humans. Of course, some people will still not appreciate being asked an NPS prompt ever, and you can opt out. You can set a configuration parameter and we won't ask you anything. But for those of you who are interested, I can also share what the result of our NPS survey was. Nico, I think we published this recently, right? Or we intended to publish this.
I'm not sure if it went out already, to be honest, but I think we do want to share it, yes. I mean, we're open source, we're asking for this publicly, so it's only fair, I think, if we also share the results then.
Yeah, and where were they? Oh yeah, for the ORM, we got 7,500 odd responses, and we got an NPS score of 58.8, which we are pretty pleased with. This tells us that we are on the right track, we're doing the right things, and we got a lot of comments, which we are still in the process of reading through, finding the ones that tell us something meaningful and not the ones that just say, okay, good, keep working. And we will incorporate that into the roadmap plans for the next quarter.
Awesome. All right, then let's maybe wrap up with an outlook for what's coming in the next release. And those of you out there watching who have been paying attention, you may have noticed that today's 6.10 release actually arrived 1 week early compared to all previous releases. And that's because we just changed our release cadence from 3 weeks to 2 weeks so that you can now get all the new things already in your hands a little bit earlier. And we don't have them sitting around in our pipelines for that long. So what's coming up in the 6.10 release in 2 weeks, Will?
The highest priority we have is still working on the query compiler. We want to get this out to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, because it has such a wide range of benefits for everyone involved. But other than that, the next thing on our list will be the new generator we released last quarter that outputs ESM compatible TypeScript instead of CommonJS compatible JavaScript. We released this in EA, early access, and we want to promote this to preview, which means for us going through a lot of the feedback that we've received, GitHub issues that people have opened, and looking at where are the rough edges for people, or where are the things missing from this that for people under certain conditions, this could actually be much better. So we are figuring that out this week, and for the next release, we hope to promote the new ESM-compatible Prisma generator to preview. And then we'll collect a bit more feedback, make sure it's stable, and by the end of the quarter, we want to get that to GA. If we get through all of that work, the next things on our list will be trying to promote some of our long-standing preview features to GA. The first two we plan to tackle are the multi-schema preview feature. That is the one that lets you access the different named schemas. Like if you're, say, a Superbase user, you've usually got your public schema and your auth schema and your storage schema. So the preview feature that lets you query these things. That's one. And the second preview feature we want to target is the views preview feature. Views are a super widely used database structure in general, and Prisma has had this views preview feature for a long time, and it is time for it to move to GA and stop being an opt-in, feature-flagged, non-production ready thing.
I'm looking forward to that. That has been sitting around in preview features for a while indeed, and moving that into GA will be a big step forward, I think. Yeah. All right. With that, I think we are at the end of this stream. Thank you all so much for joining me today, Jacek, Igal, and Will. And thanks everybody for watching. If you don't want to miss the next AMA and other cool videos that we are sharing about Prisma, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Follow us on Twitter and join our Discord if you have questions. And with that, have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.